The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point. But
And action.
Sergeant read my superstar panel. They're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship,
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
and no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning and welcome to the Camilla Tominey Show. Lovely to have your company this Sunday morning. We have got a cracking show. There's no point beating about the bush. It is good because we've got 2 massive interviews this morning. Do not go anywhere. I've got Nigel Farage in. He's going to be talking about what's next in his battle against the woke banks following the resignations, of course, of the NatWest Group CEO Dame Alison Rose and Coutts bank head Peter Flavel. I've also got an exclusive interview. We have been waiting weeks for this, folks, with former Home Secretary Dame Priti Patel. And I'm going to be asking her about why the government isn't stopping the boats, what she thinks about net zero, the future of conservatism itself, and all of those reflections on, well, holding down one of the most important jobs in government. I'm also going to be speaking to Energy Minister Lord Martin Callanan and Labour MP Barry Gardiner, and I'll be speaking with Andrew Reid, who has written the inside story of the Brexit Party. So stay where you are, stay tuned, and you're going to really enjoy the next 90 minutes. Let's go through the papers first of all. A little bit of a mixed bag, it must be said. So, the front page of the Sunday Telegraph. I am on motorists' side, says PM, as he orders a review of anti-car schemes. The Sunday Times, I can see a picture of Jeremy Clarkson, but the main headline is Sunak to pour millions into North Sea oil. It's a story that suggests he's at odds with Keir Starmer over that particular policy. The Observer revealed how hidden delays blight care for cancer patients. Post-pandemic story that many of you will be familiar with there. The Mail on Sunday goes with holiday chaos fear over EU Big Brother visas. This is about us now in this post-Brexit future having to apply to the equivalent of ESTAs, as we would when we went to the US or other countries. The Sunday Express, not again, winter energy bills to soar. Great news if anyone's been looking at the profits being made by some of these energy companies. Sun on Sunday, Shona quits Enders. OK, it's not something we'll cover on this show, but it's good if you're a soap fan. Sunday Mirror, Sunak's copter cop-out. This is about the PM's air miles and the Mirror taking a position on that. Well, to have a look at everything that's in the newspapers today, I'm joined by Martin Townsend, former editor of the Sunday Express, former editor of OK Magazine, my former boss for 15 years. Martin, lovely to see you this morning.
Lovely to see you too.
Well, let's kick off with what Sunak says in the Sunday Telegraph. He's now coming out on the side of the motorist.
Yes.
I can't think why.
No.
After Uxbridge was retained by the Tories on the back of ULEZ, we think. But tell me about this interview.
Well, I think it's good news in the sense that, for me, it's the Tories actually kind of admitting to something here, because he's talking about the LTNs, low traffic neighbourhoods, as well as ULEZ. And actually, the LTNs is something that the Tories have got to be partly responsible for, because they poured loads of money into creating these low traffic neighbourhoods during COVID, or using COVID as a bit of a cover for it, and said it would carry on during COVID and then they'd review it. Well, they haven't reviewed it. And in a lot of areas, including where I live in West London, it's now just being used as a cash cow by the council. We've got a couple of streets in West London where I live, 2 streets, where there have been 100,000 penalty notices issued to drivers going up the wrong... 100,000 and £13 million made in a year from 2 streets in West London.
That is extraordinary.
It's extraordinary. And so what's happening here is, from being something which I think we can all agree with, we want to kind of get emissions down. And the other thing is then it's not getting emissions down, because what it's doing is it's moving all the traffic onto a few roads instead of sharing it out amongst everybody, which is what I understand a democracy should be. Now it's certain streets, main roads. Well, of course, along those main roads are still a lot of people living.
Also,
along those
people
main
are plagued by congestion. There's lots of people that often say that back in the day, if they were electricians or plumbers, they'd do 10 jobs a day in London. Now they're doing 5 because it's taken them so long to get from A to B. Also, presumably, as they're in traffic, they're belching out fumes. I just don't get any of this.
Well, absolutely.
It's
just creating...
counterintuitive.
It goes back to the 1970s. I grew up in a school... I come from Harrow originally, and my school was in a huge traffic gridlock. It was surrounded by gridlocked traffic all day long, and you could literally get the black smoke off of the leaves around the school. And they changed it in the end. They brought in this kind of one-way system in Harrow. But that kind of concentrated pollution is desperately bad.
So it's not helping
So it's not helping at all. And I think a review of those LTNs and kicking out quite a few of them, I think, would be a good thing. And Rishi Sunak is indicating something along those lines today.
I mean, it's interesting that he's being quite bold in that interview. I think when he's at his boldest, he's at his best, to be perfectly honest.
Well, he needs to be, doesn't he?
There's also a quick note on the Sunday Times front page about Sunak to pour millions into North Sea oil. This obviously puts him at odds with Starmer, who says he doesn't want any more new drilling. Again, quick word on that. That's good politics, isn't it, Martin?
Well, it is. And, I mean, we know that Labour might as well just put blackouts into their manifesto, because that's what always happens under Labour government.
And job losses, according to the
Job losses and blackouts. And actually, we will get blackouts. We cannot just axe all of that North Sea. We can't not grant those licences. It would cost thousands of jobs. And it's just crazy for the country's energy needs. So
let's look at the other theme of the
news.
day, which I'm calling the banking farrago or farrago. Did you get what
Very
I've done
good.
there? I was
Very
taught
good.
by the best. My job is words. Now, we've got a number of different stories. We've got Nigel is coming on the show in just a moment, but he's in the Sunday Telegraph talking about this new website he's set up to help other people who have been debanked. We've also got this extraordinary story in The Sun on Sunday. Grant Shapps reveals he and his entire family have been hit by the debanking scandal. And then we've got story on the front of the Sunday Times, bad boys of Brexit claim they were debanked like Farage. This is talking about Aaron Banks and Andy Wigmore. People didn't speak about it back then because they were worried they were going to be debanked by other banks and their credit rating would fail. I mean, Farage has played a blinder on this campaign from a newspaper perspective, hasn't he?
Oh, he's been extraordinary. I mean, he's being called the most influential political figure since Margaret Thatcher, and in many ways he is. And for a lot of ordinary people, they'll be saying Farage is our champion. There is nobody else in government like him.
Are you worried about this, having been the editor of quite a right-wing newspaper, that you might be targeted?
Oh, totally, and I'm sure I have been. I'm absolutely certain that I have been, because, you know, my problem with this is it's coming from a position, the banks are coming from a position where, you know, the country's institutionally racist, which I don't personally believe, where, you know, there is no diversity, where there's no... And they're all signing up to these schemes and signing into these kind of woke schemes, basically, and then putting them into action, and it's basically undemocratic.
It's this policy of if you don't agree with me, then you're cancelled. 100%. I mean, what happened to agreeable disagreement, which is what we try to promote on this channel,
I personally think cancellation should be a hate crime. I personally think that.
Well, talking about cancellation, the Mail on Sunday, I mean, it is slightly silly season-ish, but it's a good read, have come up with a woke list 2023. Who's in it? And more importantly, who isn't, Martin?
Well, there's Dame Alison Rose finds us way in there, which you wouldn't be surprised. At number one, we have the Archbishop of Canterbury.
Oh, yes. The Archbishop of Woke.
The Archbishop of Woke, who, as we know, put aside £100 million of church money at the beginning of the year.
Actually, that reminds me, I should ask Priti Patel about what she thinks.
Yes, to investigate the church's links to slavery. I mean, that £100 million, I'm sure all of the parishioners all over the country where churches are closing, hundreds of churches are closing, they're having to share because I'm sure they're really pleased that £100 million being put aside for them.
The pews are emptying and they're going on about diversity and inclusion.
Well, going on about ancient history.
A few people not in there. I noticed Carol Vorderman isn't in that woke list.
No, which I'm very surprised about.
Some interesting interactions with her on Twitter over the weekend, so maybe they'll do a woke list Mark 2 and we can look forward to that. Now, final story, this was your choice. This is in The Observer. Home Office secretly backs face recognition to curb shoplifting. You feel really strongly about this. I mean, there's this sense to which the police are saying, well, we're not really going to deal with shoplifting because, you know, it's not a major crime, but for the shopkeepers affected, this is huge.
Well, for a start, I think we should get rid of, and the police should stop using the phrase low-level crime. Because there is no such thing as low-level crime. They count shoplifting, you know, car thefts, low-level crime. They're not. They have a huge impact on communities all over the country. If your local shop has the window kicked in, like ours did, our local co-op had its window kicked in and was robbed 2 or 3 weeks ago. If that happens, what it affects is the security of the whole community. Everybody feels ill at ease, particularly the elderly, particularly the vulnerable. This stuff is happening.
Face recognition, though, it's quite a big measure.
Face recognition,
Big Brother-ish.
I'm not sure about, and The Observer obviously sort of saying that as well. But, you know, shops can help themselves a little bit. You know, have this till at the front of the store, don't put it at the back of the store. They need to basically shell out to employ somebody to keep an eye on the shop. They should have security. Some of the local shops do have that.
But it's always the same serial offenders. I observed this in St Albans High Street, you know, the other day. Somebody going into Poundland, of all places, just filling a rucksack.
Yes.
I said to the staff, there's this lad doing this, but that's the way it works.
Yeah, and it's basically unfair, you know, for people that are really hard up at the moment, that are struggling to make ends meet, to see people walking in and out of shops stealing this stuff.
I mean, talking about, to conclude, Sunak and Starmer, if they both just had pushed an agenda of fairness, regardless of the ideology, they'd probably win quite a lot of votes.
Yes, well, if Starmer pushed an agenda on anything, I'd be impressed, but there we are.
Martin Townsend, thank you very much for joining me this morning. Lovely to see you.
Lovely to see you too.
Now, we're in Bexley with Olivia Utley for the People's Panel this week. Delighted to know what the panel have got lined up. What questions would they like me to ask my glittering array of guests today, Olivia?
Hello, yes, we are in sunny Bexley Heath this morning. Bexley Heath is one of those areas on the outer rim of London that's going to be heavily affected by Sadiq Khan's plan to expand the ULEZ zone, that's the ultra-low emissions zone, whereby anyone with an older and more polluting car will have to pay £12.50 a day for the pleasure of driving. There are pretty strong opinions from our panellists today, and they're very interested to see what your politicians make of it all. Without further ado, into Chin Chin's Cafe. Marianne, thank you so much for having us in this lovely Chin Chin's Cafe here on Bexley Heath High Street. It's a real pleasure and we're very grateful. Can you tell us a little bit about how business is going for you?
Yeah, it's always going good, I think, really, except for lockdown, obviously. But we've been running since 2016, so we've got loyal customers over the years as well. But we are always finding new people that have come in, and they've just found us when they've been walking about doing their shopping. So
Great. And are you finding there are any problems with business? Is there anything that politicians could do to make your life a bit easier?
Well, there's always the issue with supplies. We find that they're always going up, and we then have to raise our prices alongside those to try and still make some profit with what we're doing each day.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think inflation is a problem which is affecting lots of small businesses at the moment, so I'm sure that sentiment's echoed around the country. Again, thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to be here. And this is our brilliant People's panel. Today we've got Fraser, we've got Alan, and we've got Liam. Thank you so much for getting up so early on a Sunday morning to be with us this morning. Alan, I'm going to start with you. It feels a bit as though there are some sort of chasms opening on green policy in the main two parties at the moment. Both Labour and the Conservatives seem to be having quite a lot of internal divides. What do you make of net zero policy?
Well, I think when you look at what's going on in the world, especially Europe, and you see in those record temperatures, it's hard to sort of deny there is a problem. So we do need to do something urgently. The longer we leave it, the worse it's going to be. But at the same time, we can see the cost of living crisis. Everyone's been affected, and that costs money to sort it out. So compromises have got to be made, but I think we need to take action. I think we need to do it as soon as possible.
Thank you very much. Yeah, pretty stark message there, and I'm sure that's echoed by a lot of people around the country too. Fraser, what about you? You live here in Bexley Heath, and obviously you will know people who will be heavily affected by the expansion of the ULEZ zone. What do you make of that policy in particular?
If I had to describe ULEZ in one word, it would be cruel. We all want a cleaner, greener economy. I think we can agree on that. But ULEZ hits the poorest hardest. Those who can afford to upgrade their cars have already done so. It's those who can't afford it. I think of nurses and carers. It's £12.50 a day. If you're on the night shift, it's going to cost them £25 a day. Some of the stories you hear are heartbreaking about people having to potentially give up their jobs. I think it's a leafy suburb, it's clean green air anyway. I think he's got ulterior motives to do this. It's not our environment.
Thank you very much. That point about nurses having to pay it twice on a night shift, that's going to resonate, I think, a lot. I hadn't thought of that before. And Liam, what about you? What do you make of it? We've only got a few seconds left, but we'll come back to you later.
Yeah, I mean, ULEZ, I think, is going to hit working class people the worst. Traders are going to be massively affected by this. They can't get their vans into central London. They talk about this scrappage scheme. There's 110 million that's going to be pumped into helping people, but if your car's worth £8,000, they're only going to give you £2,000 for it. That's a £6,000 loss, and in a cost of living crisis, it's not good enough.
Who can face a £6,000 and a cost of living crisis? Absolutely. Thank you so much. That's all from our People's panellists for now. We're going to listen with very sharp ears, I think, to your interviews with politicians, Camilla, and we'll be back later in the show. Thanks very much.
Great job, Olivia in Bexley. Thank you very much, panellists. Well, yes, please keep your ear to the ground, because I have with me now in the studio GB News presenter and former leader of the Brexit Party, Nigel Farage. Crumbs, you've had quite the week, haven't you?
It's been a very busy week. Yes, I've stumbled upon something.
You have too.
Yeah, I didn't pick this fight.
No, I know.
This fight picked me. It was when I was annoyed that the accounts were being closed. I'd been with the banking group for 43 years, done nothing wrong whatsoever. But it wasn't until I got my subject access request back. And now, I'd never heard of a subject access request until 2 months ago. But when I was told I could go to the bank to find out what personal data they had on me, and when it became clear I was being debanked purely for political views, that was when I decided, you know what? I'm not going to take this.
No.
If they want to fight, they can have one. So I've got into this fight, and what I've learned is, and we see Grant Shapps today in The Sun on Sunday.
Does that surprise you?
No, not at all,
No,
saying that
you've heard
he
from so many people.
and his children, his family, have been very badly affected by his political status. You see Aaron Banks in the Mail on Sunday, a business with 500,000 customers, just literally told we're closing the accounts.
You knew about that at the time, but he didn't come forward. Why?
Well, no one did. You see, this is the point. Nobody with profile who's been debanked has come forward. 2 reasons. One, a sense of shame, humiliation and embarrassment. But secondly, it would damage their prospects of getting other bank accounts. But what I've learned is this. It isn't just high-profile people with strong opinions that have been closed down by banks that have become completely politicised in the most extraordinary way. What I've learned in the 3 weeks since I came out, as it were, I've just been inundated by small businesses, by folk all around the country, people in absolute fear, terror, lives being ruined, thousands of businesses being closed. These are people who've done nothing wrong whatsoever.
Have they been given?
You've got two problems here. The first is the cultural problem. We've touched on that. It's the politicisation of so much of corporate Britain, the banks perhaps being the worst example. The second is this. We have a whole raft of anti-money laundering directives. Much of it came through the European Union, but whatever, as soon as it gets to the FCA, the regulator, or compliance departments, they compound things and make things worse. Yes, there's an international drugs trade that launders tens of billions of dollars every week. We know that.
Yeah.
However, the legislation in place is like a sledgehammer to miss the nut. Because we're not stopping the crooks, and we're closing down small businesses. And we've seen these banks that we bailed out, our taxes went up to bail out the banks in 2008 and 2009, and in return, they've closed 5,000 branches around the country, and they're saying to businesses, you know, some are running a fish stall.
Yes.
Sorry, we don't want cash. Well, I haven't got a credit card machine.
No.
We don't want your business. They are trying to drive cash out of the economy. Any payment that comes into your account that's unusual can lead to suspension. Say you've sold a motorbike to a French motorbike collector and a payment comes in from a French account. Alarm bells go off. And we're frankly treating the local window cleaner as if he could be a front for a Colombian drug gang.
Absolutely preposterous.
And let me tell you why it's not working, why it is a sledgehammer to miss the nut. For every £1 of laundered money recovered in the system, it costs £100 to process it. So I want to see a cultural change, but government and Parliament needs to go through the legislation. This simply isn't working. It's not just ruining lives in Britain, it's damaging business in Britain.
Are we at the point where we actually need an inquiry into this, a formal inquiry?
Well, not a parliamentary one, because that would kick it into the long
How about
grass.
getting a Royal Commission on it?
I would be happy to have a Royal Commission into it, provided it happened quickly.
Yeah.
The information we've got out today is that now 1,000 bank accounts a day are being closed. A day. Every single day, 1,000 people, whether it's their personal or business accounts, are being closed down. And my concern is that Rachel Reeves, the Shadow Chancellor this week, showed no comprehension of the issue whatsoever. Now, there are many things this Conservative government have done over 13 years that I profoundly disagree with. I have to say, as soon as I came out on this subject, I thought the response from Andrew Griffith, the City Minister, and indeed from the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, has been very, very good. We need to move incredibly quickly.
I mean, Rachel Reeves is talking about the fact that the press has apparently bullied Dame Alison...
Rose.
Sorry, I'm confusing her with Howard Davis, who I'll ask you in a minute. You know, the press has been bullying her. Well, no, she unfortunately leaked your personal information to somebody at the BBC.
This is identity politics. This is, because she's a woman, it's not right she's lost her job. I couldn't care less. I couldn't care less what sex she is, what gender she is. I couldn't care less what colour she is. I'm not interested. I believe in a meritocracy where you rise on ability and you're judged on what you do.
Aren't you tempted to sue NatWest and Coutts because they've given away your personal information?
Well, they've given away my personal information.
It's a breach of privacy.
They breach GDPR regulations. Also, remember...
Well, you could take them to the cleaners.
To prove my innocence, I had to publish a lot of material about me that was wrong and defamatory, you know, but I was somehow linked to Russia. Oh, I was an anti-Semite because I criticised Grant Shapps, who I'm pleased to say puts that to bed.
But on Sunday,
but also I had to, I mean, you know, and there were some big sins
but will
here.
You sue these banks?
I like Ricky Gervais. It's quite serious, some of this.
It's very serious.
I don't know what I'm going to do. At some
point... Are you
point...
considering legal action against NatWest and Coutts?
Every option is on the table.
Yeah.
Every option is on the table. But the important thing is this. There are tens of thousands of people out there, maybe more, who have been wronged by the banks, whose lives have been ruined. They have had no one to speak for them. They've been suffering in silence, and that's why I've launched this website today,
tell us about that.
accountclosed.org. If you've been closed down, if you've been suspended, come and tell me who you are. Help me to help you. I want to build together a very powerful lobby group that MPs, ministers and government simply can't ignore, so we can get the changes that we need.
We've talked about some individuals. We've talked about Dame Alison Rose. We've also talked, I think, obviously he's resigned now, the head of Coutts, Peter Flavel. What about Sir Howard Davies? He's the NatWest chairman. He's once described Brexit as a tragedy, I think.
Yes.
And he doesn't he doesn't want to go early. He's retiring next year. Shouldn't he go now?
Extraordinary chap. I mean, fails at everything he does, but every failure leads to promotion to an even bigger and higher paid role. Look, joking aside, Sir Howard Davis chairs the NatWest board. That board, last Tuesday, endorsed Alison Rose staying in position despite the fact she'd breached the most fundamental rule of banking, that being client confidentiality. Also, Davis was the head of the regulator, the FSA as it was known at the time. Just looking at the rule book, she breached the most important principles. So mistake number one, he wanted to keep her in place. He was then forced into an embarrassing U-turn a few hours later. Yeah. Mistake number two, he called her a great leader, which means she will get a £2.43 million payoff.
Should she get that
I just
payoff?
think it's almost like a club, isn't it? They're all together in the same club. I think that was wrong.
But would you dock that payment to her?
Oh, I think 2.43 million would be completely excessive. And bear in mind, you know, 38.6% of this is effectively coming from us.
Yeah, of course.
Because the taxpayer are shareholders. But worst of all, he's now said there'll be an inquiry into the leak and the closure of Farage's accounts.
Yes, this is the person who described Brexit as a tragedy, the person who's leading this investigation.
Oh, no, it's far worse than that.
Chris Hale of Travers Smith, although Howard Davis himself is a pro-Remain.
Chris Hale of Travers Smith is the emeritus chair and you know, their top man when it comes to research. He said that Brexit was xenophobic, racist and nostalgic. Almost exactly the same words written about me in the Coutts report. How on earth can this person conduct anything like an independent inquiry? And I think for all of those reasons, Howard Davis has proved himself to be unfit for office. The government should step in before the markets open tomorrow and appoint somebody new.
Now, tell me, when do you lose this banking? Because I think there's kind of a countdown time. And what actually happens? Do they hand you all of your assets in a cheque?
Well,
right, off you go.
I did write to Peter Flavel, the boss of the CEO of Coutts, back in May, and said if I can't find alternative solutions, I'll come with a Securicor van and collect the balance of my account in cash. And he chose to ignore me.
Right.
We've got a timeline of a couple of weeks. I need to have a conversation I haven't had time last week. I have a conversation with the bank, a conversation with my lawyers, work out what I'm going to do next. To be honest, I've been so absorbed
Has anyone else
by
offered
this.
you banking in the background?
Not from a bank, no.
And if Coutts were to say, we've made a terrible mistake, we'll let you stay on as a customer, what would you say? I mean, I know you've got the personal banking by NatWest.
Yeah, but that doesn't solve my problems. No. Look, you know, I'll have a conversation with Coutts. You know, it's all well and good them saying you can stay with us, but you know, I do not want what has happened to me to happen to anybody else. And it's clear from today's newspapers, it has been happening to an awful lot of people. I want this to be a turning point in this whole appalling behaviour from banks, whether it's high-profile figures or people running a fish stall. What has happened within this industry is wrong. It's become, frankly, self-serving, in its own interests. It's damaging Britain, and I want real change. So let's see.
Remind me of the website again, Nigel.
Accountclosed.org, and I want people...
anyone can go on there if they've had a problem with their banking in terms of them being told your account's being closed down. Go on there, and you and your people can help.
And let's find out the scale of the problem.
All right, brilliant. Thank you very much for coming on the show this morning, Nigel, and good luck with this campaign. Well, we've got plenty more to come on today's show. In just a minute, I'm going to be speaking to former Home Secretary Dame Priti Patel in a GB News exclusive. And as the Conservatives enter the summer still reeling from two massive by-election defeats, I'm going to be speaking to Dame Priti about her time in office, the problems facing the government, and, of course, the future of conservatism. We'll get all of her thoughts on that just after the weather.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good morning. I'm Jonathan Watry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. Low pressure doesn't really know how to quit at the moment. Whilst yesterday's low is clearing away, we've got another one arriving for Monday. It's being powered by the jet stream, which is still stuck to the south of the UK, and it will be pushing these weather fronts in as we head throughout the day. To start off with, there are some heavy showers across southern Scotland into northern England, perhaps the odd rumble of thunder in there as well. Far southeast faring off a bit better, some sunshine, but it's into the southwest where that rain will be arriving, turning much greyer skies, turning damp as well as we head into the afternoon. Temperatures held back underneath this cloud and rain, but you might squeeze the 21, 23 degrees Celsius across parts of eastern Scotland and England during the afternoon. That rain is going to continue to spread its way eastwards this evening. Could turn quite persistent for Northern Ireland, parts of Northern England. Some spray on roads is certainly possible for if you are travelling later on today. And then much greyer skies throughout tonight, with those outbreaks of rain continuing. Feeling quite humid and sticky as well, not dropping much below 16, 17 degrees Celsius. But for northern areas of Scotland, actually a little bit of a chill in the air first thing on Monday. Might drop into mid-single figures in those rural valleys. And it is northern Scotland that's going to see the best of the sunshine throughout Monday. Light winds as well, so a relatively pleasant day here. Elsewhere, pretty drab and grey with some outbreaks of rain throughout. Some brighter spells trying to poke their way through, but it is still going to feel relatively humid if that brightness arrives. Temperatures climbing to highs of around 22 degrees Celsius. Enjoy your day. Bye-bye.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching. Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Camilla Tominey Show. In just a moment, I'll be speaking to Priti Patel, the former Home Secretary. Should the government ditch net zero and the ban on petrol and diesel vehicles? Will this government ever stop the boats? I'll be putting all that and more to her just after the news with Ray Addison.
Thanks, Camilla. It's 1 minute past 10. Here's the top stories from the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister is ordering a review into the rollout of low-traffic neighbourhoods. The scheme, which has been used by councils to stop drivers cutting through residential areas, has been seen by some as an attack on motorists. In an interview with the Sunday Telegraph, Rishi Sunak said he supports people's right to use their cars to do all the things that matter to them. Shadow International Trade Secretary Nick Thomas-Symonds told us the Prime Minister should leave the decision to local areas.
Our position is that it is for communities to make these decisions, whether it is in terms of low traffic neighbourhoods, where, by the way, there are communities up and down the country who want to reduce traffic going through their neighbourhoods, whether it is in terms of clean air zones. We've talked obviously specifically about ULEZ. Yes, we certainly believe a well-planned low traffic neighbourhood is a good thing.
The government's energy security plans will be unveiled this week, aiming to power up Britain from Britain. The Prime Minister and Energy Security Secretary Grant Shapps are due to meet bosses from the UK's oil and gas, renewable and nuclear industries. They're expected to reveal a raft of new investment plans, driven in part by the need for greater energy independence since Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Well, meanwhile, Grant Shapps says he and his family have struggled to open accounts at major banks in the wake of the Nigel Farage row. Speaking to The Sun, the Energy Security Secretary says the problem stems from being a politically exposed person, and he accused banks of going too far. It comes as Mr Farage launched a new website to help people who, like him, have had their bank accounts forcibly closed. Speaking to Camilla Tominey earlier, the GB News presenter said 1,000 accounts are being closed every day.
What I've learned in the 3 weeks since I came out, as it were, I've just been inundated by small businesses, by folk all around the country, people in absolute fear, terror, lives being ruined, thousands of businesses being closed.
And the HS2 programme has been given a red rating by the infrastructure watchdog. It believes the timetable for construction of the first 2 phases of the rail line from London to Birmingham and then on to Crewe are unachievable. The IPA's annual report, which follows the resignation of Chief Executive Mark Thurston, cites major issues with the schedule and the budget. HS2 was initially slated to open in 2026, but this has now been delayed by up to 7 years. On TV, online, on DAB+ radio and on TuneIn too, this is GB News. Back now to Camilla.
Welcome back. Do not move a muscle because I'm about to talk to Priti Patel, the former Home Secretary, in the studio. I've also got Energy Minister Lord Martin Callanan coming on, and I'm going to be speaking to Labour MP Barry Gardiner. And I've got Andrew Reid, the author of a new book telling the inside story of the Brexit Party, coming on a little later in the show. But first of all, let me introduce former Home Secretary. She needs no introduction, really, an MP for Whittam, Priti Patel. Priti, thank you so much for joining me today. It's quite a busy news day, so it's great to have you on. Let's just start with your reaction to what Nigel Farage was saying earlier, because I know you were listening. What do you make of this banking scandal?
Well, look, I think, first of all, we actually owe Nigel a big thank you for the way in which he's taken the lid off this whole issue. It's been going on for years. He's spoken about that. I now know colleagues are speaking about, from personal experience, about being PEPs and the difficulties they're having, politically exposed persons. But actually, I've seen this for years with my own constituents. So as a Member of Parliament for Whittam in Essex, we are famously the county of entrepreneurs and we're full of SMEs. I've had now for at least the last 7 years, many small businesses coming to me saying that they can't bank their own cash without literally being asked endless questions as to the authenticity of the money, the source of funds. And these are businesses that, quite frankly, frankly, they do their business in cash and they can't access their own bank accounts. They can't put money into their own accounts without literally being, you know, given endless questions. And this has to stop. So I think there are wider issues here. Nigel has touched on many of them, and I know he's got the campaign and the website. I think actually thousands of people, quite frankly, will come out and speak about this now as well.
Do we need a wider inquiry? I talked to Nigel earlier. He said, I don't want a parliamentary inquiry. I want a public inquiry, maybe even an inquiry headed, you know, a Royal Commission inquiry where you can have people subpoenaed to give evidence and that it's completely independent of the political system. Would you support that?
So I do. I don't think this can be left to politicians or to Parliament anymore. I genuinely feel that way.
Or the banks themselves, seemingly.
So, you know, these are banks that were too big to fail just over 10 years ago, and they've literally got to the state where they are now, where they've been living off our money, taxpayers' money. You know, NatWest is still owned, 38% of it by the state. So there are so many questions here. I don't think the regulators can be trusted anymore. I think there are wider inquiries that are needed about the regulatory environment that we've had, because to be quite frank, and, you know, I'm an MP, I'm a politician, this has just been rubber stamped through Parliament year after year in finance pieces of legislation.
The Governor of the Bank of England, been more vocal on this? We've not heard a thing from him except a story today in the Sunday Times suggesting that he knew about Barclays blocking Arron Bank from banking and didn't do anything about it.
Well, I think this raises endless questions. So coming back to your conversation in this interview with Nigel, this is actually a question is, you know, can the political establishment actually be trusted to ask the right questions, be independent, be probing, or even the establishment itself, i.e. the regulators and the Bank of England? So we have to look at this in a very, very different light. I think the wider problem that we have right now, actually, and I know we'll talk about net zero too, but these are the types of issues that are affecting ordinary people, their day-to-day lives, and this is because of the government, the state, regulation, the size of the state, and the way in which, quite frankly, institutions have been given a licence to operate in this way, and there's no scrutiny and there's no public accountability.
Let's talk about net zero, because you've raised it. We've got, I mean, the government and indeed the Labour Party slightly at 6s and 7s. We had the result in Uxbridge. Do you put that down to a backlash against ULEZ?
So I think, look, I mean, I've been involved in many political campaigns, you know, way over the last decade, and I was involved in the previous London mayor elections as well. So places like Uxbridge, classic constituency, places like Bexley as well. You got Olivia in Bexley this morning. Outer London boroughs that, quite frankly, are having things done to them, policies imposed upon them with a complete disregard to residents, local people,
I mean, are you
without
talking
the
about
accountability.
Local councils kind of operating in an arbitrary manner? Because I suppose the criticism that will come back to you is, well, you were once a member of the government.
Sure.
The government's been one pushing all of
twofold.
These. I mean, is it too much now? This target, I know it's been loosened from 2030 to achieve net zero to 2050.
Sure.
But there's a lot of prevarication right now among Tories to say, should we be doing this at all? Should we, Pretty?
So, well, first of all, my views on this are that actually we need to pause all this activity. 2030 is not that far away. In a, you know, click of fingers, 2050 will be upon us.
Yeah.
The public are not ready for this. And importantly, we cannot just have the state, the government, central government just sort of saying across, again, institutions, local councils, county councils, these are the targets that you have to meet when we don't have the technology, we're not ready. Now, if we want a sensible conversation about climate and the impact of climate change, recognising there are problems is one thing, absolutely, but making sure that we have the tools and the ability that doesn't impose costs and taxes on ordinary people. This is a space that we have to be in.
Are you worried?
And we're not in that space at all.
Are these policies impoverishing poorer people in your constituency?
Across the board. So, yes, I'm out of London, I'm in Essex, but it's mission creep. All of this is about mission creep. How these policies are just being rolled out. Boundaries are being pushed more and more. My county council is talking about net zero. All local authorities are. Now, they can talk about it, but stop spending our money, quite frankly, when public funds need to be targeted and spent on issues, on public service delivery, first and foremost, statutory services. And we cannot keep having these policies just blindly imposed upon taxpayers, upon my constituents and the public, without full thought and consideration given in terms of the practicalities and what this means.
When you say a pause, do you agree with a pause then on the ban on future sales of petrol and diesel cars.
Yeah, 100% I do, completely.
These were all, I mean, you were a big supporter of Boris Johnson.
Sure, I was in his government, of course.
He was pushing a lot of this. You say about supporting his mayoral candidacy back in the day. ULEZ was originally his idea, right? So,
yeah,
I mean, has he made a mistake?
So the point is, right, governments and politicians are making decisions and have made decisions. Now, it's a case of whether or not they're practical, whether or not they're achievable and whether or not they're deliverable. The default position, quite frankly, of all governments, and I mean this, of all governments over the last 20 years, is that, you know, we can just spend public money to chase targets. We have to stop that. That is a corrosive culture. And actually, it's no different, Camilla, to banking, corporate life, corporate governance that is going on in our country right now. Everyone's too busy subscribing to targets and ticking boxes rather than thinking about the practical implications. I saw also, I mean, you know, there's a lot of news out there right now, but I saw Lord Hammond give an interview as well, Philip Hammond, a former Chancellor, raising similar concerns that why is it that decisions are made in a vacuum? And I think we have to go back and peel the layer off the onion of political thinking and decision-making as well. These decisions are made in isolation of the overall impact on the British people. And if nothing else, politicians are there to govern for the British public, the British people, not just make decisions, but serve them as well, look after their interests. And net zero is running away. You know, this is a train that is moving at such pace where the technology isn't in place, where the public are being left behind, and where the public are now being taxed and being forced to pay for these decisions that actually they're having no say off, and they're the ones feeling the implications.
I wonder if we might find a rare moment where you agree with Tony Blair, who was speaking in the week and saying, well, look, you know, the British are actually doing their best, but there's very little they can do in the face of what's going on in China.
I do agree with that. I completely agree with that. So I think it was last year, or actually I think it was the year before, when we had the big COP meeting in Glasgow, for example. Now, convening the world, actually, we're quite good at convening, but we have to, you know, actually get others to step up to their commitments as well. We're an island country. We always have been. We are leaders and good leaders across the world and the globe in many areas. But right now, our priority, and I think this even more so now, Britain post-Brexit, we have to look after our nation, our country. We have to do what's right for our people. We have to make sure, yes, even on technology, I think we've got a lot going on in technology, for example. You know, on green initiatives and in net zero. I mean, you know, it's the Belgian Grand Prix today. If you look at the technology in Formula One cars, much of that emanates out of the United Kingdom. We have a massive
So we're leading on the
industry
technology.
here. We're doing well in technology, but it has to be affordable and applicable to the British public. And it's not just things that we can just talk about internationally and nationally. And other countries, we can't compete with China, for example, or
I must
India.
ask you about immigration, because, you know, obviously this quest to stop the boats hasn't necessarily happened. The Rwanda plan so far hasn't resulted in anyone being actually sent to Rwanda. Why has this gone wrong? People might point the finger of you, you know, in your previous job. Of course. Why wasn't this nettle grasped? What's your successor doing wrong, and why is this failing?
So I think, first of all, look, every government, and I've been there, you know, I've been there, got the T-shirt on this, we had a plan, and that plan was called the New Plan for Immigration. That was very much about being firm and having deterrents in place. You know, if we're going to, this isn't just stopping the boats is one aspect, but it's illegal migration. I differentiated between legal migration and illegal migration. Illegal migration is something that we all want to stop, and that means all fair-minded people want to stop the evil people traffickers and the terrible things that they're doing in exploitation.
It's not working right. Lefty lawyers, intervention from...
So many things, so many things. Lefty lawyers are one aspect of this, you know, so government needs to clamp down. That's the Attorney General, that's a Lord Chancellor on the way these legal firms behave. That's been going on for years, and, you know, all governments have not done enough on that. But if I just step backwards to go forwards on this, the New Plan for Immigration, as we had outlined, basically said we need to have detention centres, accommodation centres for people that come here. That in its own right acts as a deterrent. You process their claims there, and then when their claims fail, you send them back to their country of origin.
Plan? Has it been
torn up the government has moved forwards now with a different plan. They've got their own immigration legislation.
And what do you think of the different plan?
So the legislation has only gone through Parliament just now, so they now have to implement this. And Camilla, you know this, you write about this. The clock is ticking and the public are not seeing change. And the problem the government now has is that the stories are all about accommodation. They've made all the stories about buying tents, about Wethersfield, RAF Wethersfield, which is in Braintree district, in my district. You know, we've got a judicial review against the government because we feel that that plan is the wrong plan. And actually it's now affecting our local community. We've got a public health outbreak, for example.
So it sounds like you think that the Home Office, since you left, has been mishandling this issue.
So they've taken a different approach. They have taken a different approach. I think I am, no, because it's hard, and I'm not going to criticise my colleagues because these are tough decisions. Well, it's hard. There's no one single solution to this. But we need a deterrent factor for a start, and removals and returns. My Rwanda plan was central to that. The returns agreements that, you know, I have put in place and others are now putting in place. We have to get planes leaving the country and show that if you come here illegally, you can't just get a free pass. Being firm is actually the stance that we should take, and that means removing people and returning people to other third countries or country of origin. But also at the same time, we have to go after the people traffickers. So the laws that I put in place mean that we can now give life sentences to people traffickers. You know, you have to literally get all these elements to work together.
A quick word on legal migration, because we found out that was 600,000, I think, in the last year. Would you like to see a cap on those numbers? Well, and if you would, what would it be?
So I'm not going to do the numbers game because I don't think that's appropriate. So the numbers are high, and we have to remember why they're high. Ukraine, Afghanistan, I was involved in both of those, and Hong Kong. I was the one that set up the BNO.
Them to come down, then?
I think they will come down. But Camilla, just a final word on migration issues and legal migration as well. Points-based immigration system is effectively what we said we would deliver for the British public as part of our manifesto commitments, Britain post-Brexit. That means the brightest and the best come into our country where we have demands. Now, what we have to continue to do, and I don't think we're doing enough on this is a challenge for all governments. We still have to grow our own domestic skills base and make sure our labour market is match fit and fit for purpose, meet the productivity challenges that we face, all these big issues. We've got a long way to go there. And until we fix those domestic issues, net migration will continue to be high. We'll still be taking people from elsewhere around the world. NHS, social care, technologies. The banking sector famously relies on a lot of people with technology skills to run a lot of the systems over here.
Let's have a little word before you have to go. Time always runs away when we have these sorts of chats. But on Toryism itself, obviously the by-election overall saw the support for the Conservatives drop by 21%. It's not looking great for the next general election for the Conservatives. I think there's also been some concern about some of the candidacy selection and whether they're right-wing enough. You worried about the future of Conservatism in this country?
I'm a grassroots Conservative first and foremost. I care about my party and I care about the country and I care about centre-right politics. I really do. I want to see the next generation of centre-right Conservatives come forward. You know, we'll have a general election.
Have we had CCHQ selecting too many Liberal Democrats?
My personal view is that we've had too much centralisation. As you know, I'm actively involved in the Conservative Democratic Organisation. I believe in more democracy in our party. I believe in our grassroots having a say, a proper say, a fair, right and proper say in terms of the selection of their candidates and the people that become MPs. And they want to hear people that are authentic, that care about public service, that will stand up for their country, and not people that want to use politics or being an MP as a stepping stone to another career.
Do you think that's happened too much in the past?
So I can tell you now, I was approached last year by many Conservative MPs that basically said, you know, if I lose my seat, can you help me get a job? You know, you've had a career outside of politics. And I think that's wrong. I've told them this, by the way. I believe that politics is about public service and putting people first and, you know, putting your country first as well. And I want to see more Conservatives who are passionate about that come forward.
And what do you think the chances are, finally, of the Tories winning in 2024?
So, look, I'm an optimist about this because, quite frankly, no one can do crystal gazing.
No.
If we come together, this is really important. We've got to come together, be united and actually stand up for core Conservative values and beliefs and put the public at the heart of all of that, then we can. We need to be on their side. And the challenge that we have, Camilla, is that we have been in office for 13 years and the public are going to start to feel slightly, well, you know, you've had your chance, why don't you do this?
So what gives them a reason to fall back in love with Toryism?
And we have to, and that's being on their side, standing up for them. We showed it in Uxbridge, which obviously was about you, Les, very much so, but giving them voice, giving them heart and confidence that we believe in them is absolutely what we must do.
Priti Patel, thank you so much for joining me in the studio this morning. Lovely to speak to you. Now, I'm delighted to be joined from one Tory to another by Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State for Energy Efficiency and Green Finance, Martin Callanan. Martin, lovely to see you this morning. Now, I know the government's making an announcement about energy security. Just tell me a little bit about that.
Well, throughout this week, the Prime Minister, Energy Security Secretary will be having a load of meetings with the oil and gas industry, with the renewables industry. We'll be announcing new investments in carbon capture and storage, in renewable energy, and we'll be seeking to make sure that we exploit our oil and gas reserves to the full.
I know, Minister, that you know Priti Patel very well. She is suggesting in the studio with me in the interview that we've just put up together that actually there should be a pause in net zero and that some of these plans are just making all voters poorer. What's your reaction to that?
Well, we've got to make sure that we do it in a way that's fair and proportionate, but we now have a legal obligation to net zero by 2050. That's 27 years away, so there's still plenty of time to meet the goal. And the reality is that we have to transition away from oil and gas for two reasons. Firstly, our own supplies in the North Sea are running out, where they won't last forever. And secondly, it actually is cheaper now to have more renewables, more wind, more solar on the grid. And so if we want to have our energy security, if we want to make sure that people's bills are lower in the longer term, then it actually makes sense to roll out more renewables.
But the way that the newspapers have written this story up today, Minister, is the fact that actually the government does want to see more licences for drilling in the North Sea, unlike the Labour Party. That's where there is clear blue water, pardon the pun, between you and Keir Starmer, isn't there?
Indeed we do, and this is a long-term transition, as I said, away from oil and gas. The North Sea is a declining field. Even if we do issue more licences, then there will still be a fall in production year after year. We only get 40% of our supplies now from the North Sea. The rest has to be imported. So rather than importing things like liquid natural gas in a high carbon environment, it actually makes much more sense to use our own workers in our own oil and gas fields, generating tax for the UK Exchequer. Labour's position on this is absolutely crazy. They want to put British people out of work and move away to more imports. That makes no sense whatsoever.
You've talked about the net zero target of 2050 obviously being 27 years in advance. This 2030 target to ban the sale of new petrols and diesels is fast approaching. I've had Priti Patel here telling me that she doesn't think that the country's prepared for it. There aren't enough charging points. There isn't the infrastructure in place. Surely you have to put a stop to that policy because the country just isn't ready.
No, we are committed to that, and you can already see that most of the big manufacturers are gearing up to deliver that. They've already stopped research and development on internal combustion engines. Last week, Tata announced a £4 billion investment for Jaguar Land Rover in battery production facilities, and the reality is this is the way the world is moving, and we want to be at the forefront of that technology. Clearly, we need to do more in terms of rolling out the infrastructure. There's a lot of investment waiting in new charging points to come on stream. We have to make sure we remove the barriers, planning barriers, regulatory barriers, to stop that happening.
Minister, a final answer, please, if you could be brief, just on this issue that has been raised by the Federation of Small Businesses today, 100,000 small businesses at risk from rising energy costs. You've done things for people in the home. Are you doing enough for businesses? Because that seems an extraordinary number of people that might go under because they can't pay their bills.
Well, clearly, that's one of the reasons why we need to transition away from oil and gas. Putin's invasion of Ukraine saw a massive spike in energy prices. The government stepped in over the winter. We paid about half of people's energy bills. We paid a considerable portion of business energy bills as well. Clearly, we'll keep these matters under review, but we want energy prices to come down in the longer term, which is why we have a policy which is devoted towards increasing energy security, towards rolling out more renewables, because they're the cheapest form of energy, because that's the best way to produce a sustainable economy for the future.
Lord Callanan, thank you very much for joining me this morning. Now let's go back to Olivia Utley, who's in Bexley. I want to find out what the panellists have made of this morning's interviews. Olivia.
Hello, yes, we have been listening and watching these interviews with eagle eyes, and I've seen quite a lot of nods and a few shakes of the head too. So I'm going to start off with Alan again. Alan, you work in the finance sector. What did you make of what Nigel Farage had to say there and how he's been treated more generally?
I think he makes some interesting points. I'm not sure I agree with everything he says. I think if you're a business and you're moving large amounts of cash, there probably are legitimate questions to be asked. We can't have it both ways, right? We can't say we want to crack down on tax avoidance and anti-money laundering without asking questions. So I'm not sure about that. I think it seems he has been treated poorly. I think it was right that Alison Rose resigned for the confidentiality breach. In terms of anyone else resigning, I can't see it myself because I don't think it falls on them. So I think it's a bit of a storm in a teacup, but I'll defer to Nigel on the extent of the problem, to be honest.
Thank you very much. Storm in a teacup, but you'll defer to Nigel. It's nice to hear a nuanced view on that. That's really interesting. Thanks. And Fraser, that was an interesting interview with Priti Patel when she agrees with Tony Blair on something. What did you make of that?
Well, I agree with Priti Patel, and yes, I'm surprised to see myself also agreeing with Tony Blair. I think it's fantastic, the rate that we've seen Britain decarbonise over the years. We are at the forefront, really, of building this greener, cleaner economy. However, we can't bankrupt people to do it. And I think we are naive if we think that Britain can somehow change the global picture. When you look at the outputs in Russia, China, India, Indonesia, our input is so small in comparison. The rate of growth in China eclipses our carbon output each year. So even if we were to stop and go to net zero tomorrow, the global emissions would still continue surging ahead.
Thank you very much. I think there are quite a few Conservative backbenchers who would agree with you on that. And Liam, what about you? How did you feel about Priti Patel's reaction to the ULEZ policy and to what Nigel Farage had to say?
Yeah, I just see it really as a Labour tax bill. You know, I think Sadiq Khan's put the TfL in a massive amount of debt. And you know, you've even got the leader of the Labour Party, and Keir Starmer doesn't even really want to be associated with it at all. So you've got that front, and I think like with the banks as well, with what's happening with Farage, I don't think you should really be having unelected officials at the top of these banks dictating who has a bank account and who doesn't, just because of their political views, you know. So yeah, I think that's my point.
Do you think there'll be people who change their minds about, you know, the way to vote in the next general election based on ULEZ?
Yeah, I think ULEZ essentially will dictate on how people vote. I think, you know, I've spoken to friends and family members. It doesn't even have to be Conservative. If the Lib Dems went against ULEZ, you know, and you can see that in, like I said, with like West Streeting, with Keir Starmer, none of them want to be associated with the general election coming up next year. So that is quite interesting. So we have to wait and see what happens.
Thank you very much. Pretty stark message for Sadiq Khan there. So that's what our People's Panel think here in Bexley. For now, back to Camilla in the studio.
Great job, Olivia, and thank you to all of the panellists there speaking so clearly about their opinions. It's great to hear. Now, if you want to join the panel next week, go to gbnews.com/panel. There's lots more still to come on today's show. Don't go anywhere, because we're going to be hearing from Labour MP Barry Gardiner, and I'm also going to be speaking to Andrew Reid, who's written the inside story of the Brexit Party. We'll be back before you know it.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vaughtry here with your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. We have two areas of low pressure with us at the moment. The first, tracking its way across northern areas of Scotland, bringing this secluded front with some showers at times. The second one pushing its way into the southwest. We've already started to see some rain moving to southwest England, turning heavier for parts of Wales into Northern Ireland later on as well, and certainly the sky is turning quite grey through here. Some sunnier spells still in between the showers that bubble up across northern England into Scotland, but some of those showers still on the sharp side in places. Temperatures ranging between 18 and 20 degrees Celsius, perhaps 22 across the far east of England, but increasingly humid as we head into tonight with this rain and cloud pushing its way through, breezy as well, particularly gusty around some coastal areas. Outbreaks of rain continuing for many, progressing its way up into Scotland, but it's the far north of Scotland that will likely stay dry with some clearer spells, and under those clearer skies will turn a bit chillier, down to around 5 degrees Celsius in some sheltered villages A much warmer and more humid start to everywhere else on Monday morning. The rain tracking across the Channel Islands, lingering along some coast of southern England, but a few brighter spells trying to develop in places, that's still with the risk of showers at times. The rain looking like it will push into northern areas of Scotland, but generally central southern Scotland as well, seeing some more persistent areas of rain. Generally feeling rather cool for most of us with all of that rain and clouds around, and further unsettled spells, particularly to come on Wednesday. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point.
And action.
Sergeant, we're being greeted by superstar panel that are already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think. Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Camilla Tominey Show. Lovely to have your company this morning. Now, let's get Labour's view on everything that we've been discussing so far. Barry Gardiner, the MP for Brent North since 1997, joins me now. Sorry, does that make
you make me
Barry?
very old, yes.
My goodness me. Well, it's a tribute to your wisdom and experience
Indeed.
on such matters.
Indeed.
Let's kick off with the banking farrago, as I'm calling it, with Nigel Farage. I'm a bit confused by Labour's position because we've had Rachel Reeves on one hand saying, oh, the press are bullying Dame Alison Rose out of her job as NatWest CEO. I think Starmer seems to be supportive of Farage's quest to try and find out what's going on. He's come on the show this morning and says that he thinks 1,000 bank accounts a day are being closed down. I mean, I'd imagine as a long-standing Labour MP, that makes you pretty uncomfortable.
Look, make the most of this, Camilla,
Yes.
because one time only,
Yeah.
you will hear me being supportive of Nigel Farage, OK?
Great to hear. Arch Remainer Barry Gardner, make a
But
note of this,
not
ladies
on
and gents.
Brexit, right? But no, look, banking is something that is vital to everybody's life in the UK.
Yeah.
And if it can be arbitrarily taken away from you, that is not right. And I think what happened to Nigel Farage was wrong. And I think what's going on underneath that in terms of the way in which banks treat their customers really does need investigated. I want to put a proviso to that. And that is that we in London have unfortunately become a centre for money laundering.
Yeah.
And we know that. It's come from Russia, it's come from a lot of places, and you only have to look at the number of very plush apartments, you know, in Kensington, South Kensington area, that there are no lights on in the evening to know that it's money laundering that is funding those as an investment for the future, right? We need to deal with money laundering, but the way in which the banks are doing this is actually victimising ordinary people. So I think we do need an investigation. It does need to be sorted out.
It was Alison Rose that was being victimised. She made a mistake on that.
It's for you to ask Rachel about her own
We would
view.
love to have Rachel Reeves on this show.
well,
She isn't as open
yeah.
to doing GB News as you are, Barry.
Well, I've always believed that, you know, the people that you need to talk to are the people who are less likely to vote for you, because that way I can persuade your audience to come and vote for
Barry
me.
Gardner, amen to that. Now, let's talk about voters and what they think of you, Les. I'm particularly interested in your view because I know your constituency of Brent North is kind of on the border of the extension, so people are going to be driving out of their homes in Brent North straight into a 1250 charge. Are you a supporter or not?
They already do, because they cross the North Circular. But look, I'm a huge supporter of ULEZ.
Really?
And yes, absolutely. I'm a huge supporter of the ULEZ for a very good reason. This is a public health issue. And, you know, whether it's ULEZ, whether it's climate change, the question you've got to ask yourself is, how much are you prepared to steal from your own children? Because that's what's going on. If you have a child that grows up within 100 metres of a main polluting road, that's 10,000 vehicle movements a day, that child grows up with a lung capacity impaired by up to 1/3. Now, if you're prepared to do that to your children, fine. Back the campaign against the ULEZ.
Anyway, if we've got a ban on new petrol and diesels, and we're all persuaded
that's
to buy...
2030,
yeah,
Camilla,
and
it's new,
it's only 7 years.
No,
Barry.
but it's new petrol and diesel vehicles.
What about your constituents? Aren't they worried about being multiply taxed? You know, you've got the motorists being taxed when they buy their petrol, when they're actually taxed. Obviously, they pay money for their tax disc. They're being taxed perhaps secondarily because they might have to get a residence parking permit. They then drive through an LTN and they get fined, they get taxed. They go to the centre of London, they have to pay a congestion charge, they get taxed. Now it's going to be extended so that you're basically paying an extra tax just to get around Greater London. I mean, there is a very strong argument to suggest that this is making the poor poorer. And as a Labour MP, I didn't think you'd be happy with that.
Camilla, who has caused the cost of living crisis? Liz Truss, Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng, £40 billion off our economy. Who promised
That's not got anything to do with you, Les, though, because Sadiq Khan came up with this ages ago.
Sorry, Sadiq Khan came up with it. You yourself said earlier on the programme... Yeah, you yourself... Well, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Because it was Boris that initiated the ULEZ, as you well know. And actually... Yes, I do.
Okay.
I support that. But hang on. No. Let's go back to Grant Shapps, because you know very well that in the negotiations at the time of COVID, the negotiations with TfL, it was Grant Shapps who insisted that it was an obligation on TfL to expand the ULEZ. Okay. Now, the government believes that this is the right thing to do. They believe that it's right to support scrappage schemes because they're giving £230 million to Birmingham, to Bristol, to Oxford for their scrappage schemes. What they're not doing is giving a penny piece to Londoners. Now, so I've got a question for the government, and that's why are you not giving...
And up to £9,500 for vans. I looked it up last week.
Yeah.
So are you saying that there should be more money for the scrappage scheme?
What I'm saying, there should be more people who are eligible for it, precisely in the way that you're
This
suggesting.
is Angela Rayner's concern
precisely
as well.
what you're
She called
saying.
it unaffordable. She said it's not affordable for Londoners. And I think that was echoed by Wes Streeting.
Well, I'm sorry. Let's be absolutely clear. The government could give the money to London that they have given elsewhere. The reason that they have not done so is they wanted to use the ULEZ as a political stick to beat the mayor with, the London mayor with.
I mean, politically that's kind of worked, hasn't it? Because would you agree that Uxbridge was retained by the Tories on the back of the backlash against the ULEZ?
Well, you see, I would have liked us to have been much firmer in our support of ULEZ in Uxbridge.
But you're not saying that Khan is doing this against his will. He wants to expand it.
It's the right thing to do. I absolutely believe that this is about public health. Don't take the politicians' word for it. Listen to what the British Heart and Lung Foundation are saying. Listen to what all the doctors are saying. Listen to what the medical experts are saying. They say it's 4,500 deaths a year that are caused prematurely by air pollution, and it can be solved by ULEZ. Now, that's important because it's our children's future that we're talking about.
But you've said this week that you, repeating actually those words just that you've said here about the playing of party political games, and you've said that we should mobilise on a footing to combat rising global temperatures.
Yes.
So do you think that Starmer should be more stridently in support of the ULEZ because he's prevaricated on it since Uxbridge? He doesn't seem to think it's a good idea for Khan to be pursuing it because he thinks it's going to lose him votes in the capital.
I don't think that's quite what Keir said. I think he's asked Sadiq to reflect and to listen, right? Now, I'm not going to get into a spat with a party leader, my party leader, who actually supports the ULEZ, wants it to be introduced in a way that people can manage. We all want that because we want to take the public with us.
Maybe that
and it's really, really important.
Down, Barry.
Well, maybe what needs to happen is the government needs to put the money into London that it's put into the rest of the country for ULEZ to make sure that it can come down. There, you and I might have a point of agreement.
Do you know what? You've already agreed with Nigel Farage. If we
This is
have a
terrible.
point of agreement...
You're ruining my
Barry
reputation.
Gardner, what is happening to you? This is the GB News effect, you see. Thank you very much, for as ever, for coming on in such good humour, but also I think, you know, you've given a robust defence of that policy, and as you say, when you're talking about children's lives, it does give the other perspective, even though politically this seems to be a bit of a hot potato. Thank you very much for joining me this morning, Barry Gardner. As I say, the MP for Brent North since 1997, but we don't say that at all to make him feel old. Now, don't go anywhere, because I'm going to be speaking to Andrew Reid, who has written the inside story of the Brexit Party. We'll be back before you know it.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the people's channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Camilla Tominey Show. Now, sometimes we do plug books which we think are of interest to you, the viewers and the listeners, and it's this one by Andrew Reid, who's the author of The Inside Story of the Brexit Party. It's called The Art of the Impossible, How to Start a Political Party. The mind boggles, frankly, Andrew, but tell me about how you got involved in the Brexit Party. What intrigues me about that whole movement is that the Brexit Party did so well, and it was very representational of society at large, and it didn't quite get the criticism that was attracted to UKIP back in the day. Why was that?
Well, that was because when we planned to set it up, it was going to cross all political spectrums.
Yeah.
So in simpler words, it was not going to be there as representing one party, but actually representing the views of actually the 17.4 million people who voted for Brexit.
Might be lefties, might be righties, might be somewhere in between.
Well, I mean, you know, we had Mrs. Fox, as she was known then.
Yeah, Claire Fox, yeah.
Claire Fox. So we had people of every political colour. It didn't make any difference. But if they believed in Brexit, then they were very welcome to join or participate in bringing about the success that the Brexit Party brought about, only to be let down, sadly.
Yes, well, let's get on to that in a minute. But when you say about the art of the impossible in setting the party up, just how difficult was it? I mean, we just heard from Nigel about the kind of debanking scandal, this culture that has permeated of, if you don't agree with me, then you're cancelled. How difficult was it to get this off the ground?
Well, if you look, I'm going to say page 29 in the book, there we are, what, how many years ago now? 4 or 5 years ago, where we couldn't get a bank account, right? Exactly that.
Yeah.
Because we were effectively a thorn that no bank wanted to have. And eventually, when the reform, or Brexit reform, got a bank account, it had it cancelled, I think, about a year later. So. And
at the time, presumably, the suspicion was because it was this kind of politically exposed argument that. Or did you think it was the establishment trying to shut down people who had pro-Brexit sympathies?
Well, I think it was the latter.
Yeah.
I mean, the reality is, you know, UKIP was impregnated by MI5. We were effectively, in the form of the Brexit Party, were the last thing they wanted to appear on the horizon.
Yeah.
But it was too short a period for anyone to be able to get inside it. But yes, there were a lot of problems in setting up a party. I mean, you've got so many. You've got the the physical organisation, then the organisation of people.
Yes.
And then the hardest thing is dealing with the Electoral Commission, who were totally against us.
Again, because they had the pro-Remain establishment viewpoint.
Precisely. And we'll move later on in our conversation onto the Gordon Brown scenario, which is a very interesting one, where, again, we get the Russian nonsense.
Yes, Russian funding, Russian backing and all that. And that's all just a smear.
Complete smear. But what did the Electoral Commission do? The day before the election, they put it out the night before that they're going to be visiting the offices to have a look at illegal donations.
That's
of course,
right.
they found absolutely nothing.
Yes.
And, you know, it was this approach that was throughout any official organisation towards...
It's amazing you got it off the ground at all. Can we talk about Nigel's role in it all? I mean, how pivotal was he? And does he need to get more involved in reform, as the Brexit Party is now known?
That's a decision that he will make.
I know, but it might give you a bit of rocket fuel.
Yeah, he is rocket fuel. Look, Nigel has a following of about 5 million people. Like it or like it not, the Conservatives, and for that matter any other party, has to accept that, because he is a conviction politician.
Yeah.
We have so few of them who actually believe in what they are saying and believe in talking to people. Nigel can talk to someone who has a completely opposite view to his own and listen, whereas most politicians now are only put in set positions and are not able to cope with any form of argument against what they've been told to say.
But how much of a threat do you think reform now are on the right? You know, there's increasing concerns. I discussed it earlier with Priti Patel about Conservatives no longer being conservative enough. I mean, is there that space for the party on the right? And is there space for a party on the right to succeed without Nigel Farage at the helm?
Well, I think there's a lot of people who are homeless in this country. I mean, I would say I'm one of them. And probably a new form of party needs to come in.
What, in addition to reform?
Well, it may well be a new...
Well, we're talking about new Conservatives. I mean, sometimes people I meet in the street say, why doesn't the likes of Nigel, Priti, Jacob, other righties in the party who are disgruntled with the direction of governmental travel, why don't they all form their own party? Could that work, Andrew?
Well, I actually tried to get a message through to Liz Truss.
Yeah.
To talk to him, to realise that there is a view. Because,
to talk to Farage?
Yeah.
Yeah. What, to kind of get those two together and see...
Well, it never happened, didn't it? But I did try to send that message through. Because, I mean, she was basically ousted in a bloodless coup. I mean, that's really what happened. Quite interesting, but no one's ever analysed it in those terms, because we are now, in terms of the interest rates and all the other horror stories, exactly where they said it was going to happen if she was there. But at least she had an idea to bring something new, to encourage growth, rather than just to stymie it.
What's your analysis of Rishi Sunak, briefly?
My analysis is that he's a good man who hasn't quite worked out where he needs to be.
Where do you think he needs to be?
I think he needs to get back to some proper Conservative values. I mean, I think the Conservatives have achieved in the last 12 years more than any Labour government would have achieved.
Yeah, in high spending and high tax.
Exactly, all of that. And when you now have a situation where 52% of the working population work for the state, this is getting very frightening.
Yes.
We're heading into Russian tractor factories sort of type situation.
Andrew Reid, we're going to have to leave it there just for time reasons, but just give your book a little plug. It's the inside story of the Brexit Party, the art of the impossible. Although, as we've seen here through our own fellow GB News presenter, anything is possible. And in fact, what he's done on banking, I don't know, I just get the feeling this is the turning of a tide, not just on the banking issue, but just cancellation in general. This idea that if you've got an opposing view, then you're not just a racist and a bigot, but you aren't able to air it and you can be debanked. So let's just watch this story very, very closely, because I think there's more to come this week. Now, I'm going to be back next week at 9:30, still the only political show on a Sunday morning. But up next, it's Arlene Foster. She's going to come just after this weather.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. We have two areas of low pressure with us at the moment. The first tracking its way across northern areas of Scotland, bringing this secluded front with some showers at times. The second one pushing its way into the southwest. We've already started to see some rain move into southwest England, turning heavier for parts of Wales into Northern Ireland later on as well, and certainly the sky is turning quite grey through here. Some sunnier spells still in between the showers that bubble up across northern England into Scotland, but some of those showers still on the sharp side in places. Temperatures ranging between 18 and 20 degrees Celsius, perhaps 22 across the far east of England, but increasingly humid as we head into tonight with this rain and cloud pushing its way through, breezy as well, particularly gusty around some coastal areas. Outbreaks of rain continuing for many, progressing its way up into Scotland, but it's the far north of Scotland that will likely stay dry with some clearer spells, and under those clearer skies will turn a bit chillier, down to around 5 degrees Celsius in some sheltered villages. Much warmer and more humid start to everywhere else on Monday morning. The rain tracking across the Channel Islands, lingering along some coast of southern England, but a few brighter spells trying to develop in places, that's still with the risk of showers at times. The rain looking like it will push into northern areas of Scotland, but generally central southern Scotland as well, seeing some more persistent areas of rain.